Good morning. This is a review PowerPoint to talk about the things we covered before the coronavirus shut down. Off of this, you will go through and make a 10-question quiz using any form you want. You can use quizzes, you can do just questions and answers on a Google Doc and share that with me, or you can handwrite them, take a picture, and email that to me. But you will need to make a 10-question quiz of your own with the right and 3 wrong answers in multiple choice format. The topics that we will cover on this, starting off, will be the Roaring Twenties, Flappers, Prohibition, which we have already covered, and the Harlem Renaissance. That'll be the first half of it, so you get about half your questions from there. We also have the topics of the Red Scare, with the threat of communism potentially arising in North America, modern versus traditional, and race and religion. And that really ties us into the Scopes Monkey case with William James Bryan showing up again. That also fundamentalism, with people believing to use the Bible for all things in life, not just worship. And then we'll get to the Teapot Dome scandal with the first cabinet level person going to jail, Secretary of Interior Albert Fall, and then finally wrap up with the Lost Generation. So you get about half your questions from that also. Let's start off with the day one topics there. First off with the Roaring Twenties. If you remember, coming back from World War One, Americans were doing very well economically. Europe was all torn up from all the trench warfare in Western Europe, and we provided a lot of the money, the capital, and the industry to help rebuild Europe. We also greatly expanded our industry, and we're becoming a consumer economy where, because of the assembly line and mass production, Americans are able to get a lot more materials than they ever could before. And therefore, also with the use of credit, people were able to buy things they couldn't necessarily afford right away, but could have right away. And then we also had a lot of other things changing, not just the economy, but in terms of transportation, with automobiles becoming much more available through Henry Ford's Model T and other varieties. Education, kids going to having compulsory school attendance. School buses getting a lot larger groups of people together. Communication changing rapidly with radios broadcasting sports, music, and news, entertainment all over the country. We already mentioned home appliances, allowing people a lot more free time to enjoy themselves. Entertainment, due in large part to the Great Migration. We're going to have jazz popping up, especially in the Northeast. It'll spread all over the world. And then Hollywood also, with both the silent and spoken films during this time period. I did mention the Great Migration. That's going to lead into the Harlem Renaissance in a big way. We talked about Langston Hughes with that. Starting things off again with automobiles, not only is it going to greatly increase the economy because there's so many cars purchased, but there'll be other auxiliary industries coming off of that. We mentioned in class mechanics, roadside diners, motels, road construction, national parks are going to get used a lot more as people have more access to them. It also allows people to live farther from work, and you start to have a suburban culture pop up. We'll get to that more in the 1950s. Also talked about flappers and the new types of women, now that women have the right to vote, and they're also earning income. A lot of times in big cities, working in department stores or secretaries and things like that, they're living on their own. So instead of being under their father's roof or living with their husband, you have the single women starting to emerge. And additionally, because of the prohibition, it used to be you only had men in bars, but now no one's allowed to go to bars, but everybody is. So men and women are going to bars and enjoying that. Women are starting to cut loose. Fashion's changing. They're wearing less clothing, especially shorter, tighter fitting dresses, shorter haircuts, dancing a lot more. To mention the Charleston, Lindy Hop, a variety of very expressive, high energy dancing going on. Then we rolled into the Harlem Renaissance and discussed how, due to the Great Migration and the large amount of African Americans moving out of the American Southeast, going north and going west, there's a lot, not necessarily less racism in the north, but more economic opportunity in the north. So have African Americans in places like Harlem, New York, where they have money left over to go out and enjoy recreational time, entertainment, and African American arts are going to start to really flourish. We mentioned Langston Hughes, the primary person we talked about there, with his discussions or his poems about African American experiences. Moving on from there, we went into the Red Scare. This has gotten into our day two notes. So with that, the Red Scare, we also mentioned with World War I ending, At the end of World War One, the Russian Tsar and royal family was all killed by communists and by revolutionaries in Russia that led to a communist revolution predicted by Karl Marx in his book, The Communist Manifesto from the 1800s. That led to a brief revolution and then the installation of the Soviet Union, the world's first large-scale communist government. People were afraid that the same kind of thing could happen here. Fortunately for us, we had gone through a progressive era where large government, federal government, had started to work on behalf of consumers and workers, and that greatly reduced the threat of the Red Scare. But you did have people informing on each other. We mentioned the Sacco and Vanzetti trial, where you had two anarchists and socialists on trial for murder that it appears they did not commit, but it seems like the trial was much more about politics than about an actual homicide. We went into the Scopes Monkey trial, where the state of Tennessee passed the Butler Law, which prohibited any school in the state that received state funding from teaching any form of evolution from lower beings, and it mandated that schools teach divine creation of man as taught in the Bible, which is obviously a violation of church and state. So the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, put an open request out that any teacher in Tennessee violate that law, and the ACLU would provide for their legal defense. That was taken up by John T. Scopes, who did use a state-approved textbook to explain the ideas of evolution. He's arrested in accordance with Butler Law and defended by Clarence Darrow on behalf of the ACLU. Darrow went up against the famous William Jennings Bryan and eventually lost the case because it wasn't about whether evolution was plausible or even correct. It was about whether he had violated the law, and he did. So the bigger part of that, though, is the Scopes Monkey trial and the media attention brought to the cause of evolution spread it throughout the country, and we now teach evolution in schools along with the ideas of creationism. So again, that takes us into fundamentalism, with the idea that people want their faith to be not only the basis of their lives, but of all lives in the community. And this is based in large part to what people saw as a decreasing moral compass of America. They saw things like the violation of prohibition laws and the behavior of flappers or of anybody during this time period as something that's degrading the quality of our country. And we need to get back to our foundation and back to the Bible to live a more appropriate personal life and therefore a more prosperous national life. Finally, we covered the Teapot Dome scandal, where the Secretary of Interior under Warren Harding, a man named Albert Fall, was arrested and imprisoned for illegally selling oil that had been set aside for emergency naval usage. So the idea here is that we had set aside a large amount of oil under what's called the Teapot Dome, and then if we were attacked by a foreign country, that oil will be available to the Navy to go out and do their job and defend our country. Again, Secretary Fall was illegally selling that oil for his own personal gain. So getting back to sort of Gilded Age abuse and corruption there. And then the last thing we covered in the notes, The Lost Generation, which was a series of American writers that talked about the issues of the Roaring Twenties, sort of the opposite of fundamentalism here. They also see a problem with American society, but as opposed to using religion as the answer, they're using fictional stories. We talked about, let's see here, Ernest Hemingway, who covered World War I in great detail with his book Farewell to Arms and the abuses of war, how we can glorify war through literature, but a lot of times it's much more horrific than it seems, and a lot of times it's caused for very inappropriate reasons like profit. F. Scott Fitzgerald with The Great Gatsby showed off the glitz and glamour of the Roaring Twenties, but also showed how that was really causing a lot of moral issues for people. Let's see here. We also had Gertrude Stein is one that came up with the term of the Lost Generation. Sinclair Lewis, another Lost Generation writer, became the first American to win the Pulitzer Prize by showing how middle-class urban living was causing problems there as well. We also talked about Mickey Mouse coming from Walt Disney. So again, those are all the topics we covered the week before the coronavirus breakout or schools shut down. We will not have a quiz on that. Again, I would like for you to go through that set of PowerPoints there, the Test 4 Quiz A guided notes, and come up with a 10-question quiz. You may use, again, Google Docs. You may use Quizizz. But I'd like you to come up with a 10-question multiple choice quiz, indicate what the right answer is, and come up with some wrong answers, and share that with me. You can submit that. Again, if you're at Google Docs, you can submit that to me, or just email me a link to your Quizizz. If you have any questions, please email me. Again, it's dcpaddock@clevelandcountyschools.org, or you can call the school and they will patch you through. Again, hope everybody's doing well. Hope you're safe and comfortable. And please reach out to me if there's anything I can help you with, or if there's anything you need, I can get you in contact with people to help you. Take care, and we'll come up with the Test 4 Part B notes presentation shortly.